Hey guys, tonight we journey to a place where the sun vanishes for months. The cold cuts through wool like it's gauze, and even the bravest explorers second-guess their life choices. You're standing on the deck of a 19th century Arctic expedition ship. The wind howls like a starving animal. The sea is frozen in place, and your boots creak over splintered wood rimed with ice. Every surface sparkles with frost, and your breath fogs instantly. You haven't seen land or a fresh vegetable in weeks. Below deck, the ship groans with the weight of thousands of pounds of supplies, and among them, there's one item you can't seem to escape: cheese. Wheels of it, blocks, bricks, wrapped in cloth, coated in wax, crumbling or sharp, and in some cases questionably damp. You open your personal chest, and yep, more cheese. Why? You're not exactly sure, but it's everywhere. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and what time it is where you are in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 1845. You've just left port in England, bound for the Arctic in search of the Northwest Passage, an icy shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific that might just make you famous. The ships are HMS Erebus and Terror, and their names already feel like bad omens. You serve under Sir John Franklin, a career naval officer known for both his ambition and his somewhat inflexible diet plans. The provisioning list was long and expensive: salt pork, hardtack, tea, chocolate, and over 8,000 pounds of cheese. That's 4 tons. And that's just on one ship. You'd like to believe there was some high-minded science behind this, but as you lean against a cold wooden barrel of double Gloucester, you can't help wondering if maybe, just maybe, someone got carried away. Especially since one officer admitted they added an extra wheel per man for morale. Back then, nobody really understood calories the way we do now, or protein breakdown, or say, why carrying that much lactose into an icy abyss might cause problems. People assumed if something didn't rot immediately in a pantry back home, it would last forever in the cold. Spoiler, that's not how cheese works. At least not all cheese. Some wheels can age beautifully over decades, sure. But others? They crack, they mold, they absorb moisture, and worst of all, they sweat. There is nothing more demoralizing than discovering your cheese is sweating in -20 degrees Celsius weather. You wake up each day to the same haunting menu: cheese with salt pork, cheese with hardtack, cheese grated onto dried peas. Sometimes it's cooked into something called a cheese mess, which sounds much more poetic than it tastes. And here's the kicker. Some of the cheese isn't even meant for eating soon. It's long-aged cheese, meant to mature during the voyage, which means you're not only hauling 4 tons, you're babysitting it. You remember the day the hold was sealed? 2 midshipmen had to be pulled out after getting stuck between towering wheels of Cheshire. The ship's dog barked for an hour at a mysterious odor wafting from an overripe Stilton. No one dared investigate. Meanwhile, you're burning calories faster than you can replace them. Trudging across ice eats up energy like fire eats fuel. Your wool layers never quite dry. Every breath you take seems to scrape your lungs. And yet, there's always cheese. Historians still argue whether the overpacking of cheese came from genuine nutritional intent or simply from naval tradition. See, back home, cheese was a naval staple. It was dense, calorie-rich, and didn't need baking. The Victorians trusted it, worshipped it, even. At one point, there were literal cheese funds in English villages to support shipping wheels to the Navy. And there's a fringe theory you once overheard from the ship's carpenter, that certain cheeses, when kept near your feet in your hammock, could warm your toes. No one's ever proven this. No one ever should. One night, you dream you're being crushed by a runaway wheel of red Leicester. You wake up screaming. The cook tells you to go back to bed and think of cheddar instead. You try. By now you've learned that cheese, when cold, develops a kind of chew-resistant hardness. Biting into it can feel like gnawing on a hockey puck made of salt and regret. Some men dunk their cheese in tea to soften it. Others scrape it thin and smear it onto biscuits, praying for some kind of culinary redemption. A surgeon once joked that if you eat enough cheese, your body will forget what fresh produce even is. Then he stopped laughing because someone reminded him that scurvy was still very much a thing. Yes, despite the mountain of dairy on board, no one packed enough citrus. Lime juice went rancid in tins. Vitamin C? Not in cheese. The irony is brutal. You're full of food, but starving all the same. One day, you discover a new layer of frost on the walls, inside the ship. You try to warm your fingers near the stove, but even the galley's fire can't reach every cold corner. In the background, someone is slicing cheese, methodically, like it's their one act of control. You start to miss variety. Apples, pickles, even boiled cabbage, anything not cheese. But cheese is all you have. Cheese is constant. Cheese is destiny. Awaiting continue. You're standing on a slushy dock in Deptford, early morning mist curling off the Thames, surrounded by crates, barrels, and a fair amount of chaos. Officers bark orders. Sailors haul sacks. Hooves clatter from the horse carts arriving with more and more provisions. You step carefully over a pile of split peas and wonder if anyone's actually keeping track of what's being loaded onto the ship. Spoiler, not really. This is provisioning day, and it feels less like careful planning and more like a panic-induced grocery haul before a snowstorm. If that snowstorm were going to last 3 years and possibly end in cannibalism. You wouldn't think cheese would be such a priority, but it's arriving by the cartload. Not metaphorically. Literally, cartloads of cheese are being stacked and counted, then recounted because someone misplaced a dozen wheels. You watch one sailor balance a round of cheddar the size of a carriage wheel on his back and vanish into the hold. He doesn't reappear for 20 minutes. When he does, he looks changed. There's a sort of anxious urgency in the air. These are the final days before departure, and the quartermasters are going full dragon horde mode. The goal is simple. Bring enough food to keep 129 men alive, warmish and relatively scurvy-free for possibly years. But the methods? Not exactly rooted in scientific precision. Here's a fun historical fact. The British Admiralty ordered over 136,000 pounds of preserved meat, 9,000 pounds of chocolate, 8,000 pounds of tobacco, and yes, 4 tons of cheese per ship for Franklin's expedition alone. That's enough to make you wonder if the goal was survival or opening a luxury delicatessen in the Arctic. And it's not just Franklin. Pretty much every Arctic expedition in the 19th century followed the same pattern. Pack like your ship is a floating cheese emporium. But why? Historians still argue whether this was a cultural bias, cheese as a symbol of British reliability, or if it was just a misunderstanding of nutritional needs. Either way, it became tradition. And once something becomes tradition, it becomes sacred. Even if that tradition involves stuffing thousands of pounds of dairy into a wooden coffin floating through ice. One officer on your crew, Lieutenant Smalls, brags about how he personally arranged for a special order of red Cheshire to be delivered just before departure. He pats the crates lovingly, like they're his children. He says they'll be aged to perfection by the time we're rounding Greenland. You don't have the heart to tell him that cheese aging on a ship isn't as romantic as it sounds. It's mostly just mold and disappointment. By now, the ship's lower hold is a labyrinth of food. There are barrels of flour and salt pork, stacked sacks of dried beans, cans of pemmican, and nestled between them, great waxy lumps of dairy gold. Someone jokes that if the ship sinks, it'll float, on cheese alone. The cook, a gruff man named Farley with forearms like cured hams, keeps a private stash of sharp cheddar under his bunk. He claims it gives him dreams of England. You try it once. It gives you indigestion and a weird desire to duel your reflection. There's an undercurrent of fear in the provisioning frenzy. Everyone knows these supplies aren't just for meals. They're a lifeline. Once you're frozen into the pack ice, there are no grocery stores, no foraging. The Arctic gives nothing. Every calorie you bring is all you'll get. Which is why it's so wild that no one is being particularly rational about it. The logistics are messy. Some of the rations are experimental canned goods, some are oversalted, some are frankly mysterious. And the cheese? No one seems to know exactly how much has been packed. Just a lot, possibly too much. But no one's brave enough to just taking less. Less cheese? Heresy. You meet a steward named Tompkins who's drawing up the official manifests. He's sweating over a notebook, trying to make the numbers add up. "We've got cheese listed under 3 different spellings," he mutters, and someone counted a barrel of Stilton twice, or possibly it's 2 barrels. The ink ran. Still, the Admiralty is proud. On paper, this expedition is a marvel of planning. Modern science, they call it. Steam engines, preserved food, precision instruments. But you, standing among towers of cheese and barrels of lard, are beginning to see a problem. This isn't a sleek machine, it's an overstuffed pantry on stilts. And worse, no one can agree on what will actually be edible 6 months in. Some officers trust the canned meat. Others say it tastes like dog food and smells like regret. Some argue for pemmican, an indigenous food made of meat and fat that actually works, but it's still considered foreign and thus suspect. But cheese? Everyone agrees on cheese. You catch wind of one expedition years ago that rationed cheese down to an ounce per man per day. Sounds modest until you remember that when it's freezing, you need thousands of calories just to keep your body from eating itself. A block of cheese won't cut it. But it's familiar, it's tangible, it doesn't leak. Unless it does. And here's a quirky tidbit. Someone on your crew insists on packing a single wheel of singing cheese. Apparently, it emits a faint hum when tapped, due to trapped air. You tap it once, it sounds like regret. By the time the final manifest is closed, the ship's waterline has dipped noticeably. You've taken on a suspicious amount of ballast, and almost all of it is edible. That night, over a dinner of cheese, salt pork, and lukewarm tea, you stare into the flickering lantern light and try not to think about how long this food has to last. Someone asks, "Do you think they packed enough?" Someone else mutters, "Enough cheese or enough brains?" You don't sleep well that night, not because it's cold, though it is, but because you dream you're trapped in a maze made entirely of cheddar, and there's no way out. And there's no way out. Awaiting continue. By now, your boots have slipped across more ice than any reasonable person should endure in one lifetime. And still, the most dominant thought in your frostbitten brain is, why is there so much cheese? Weeks into the expedition, your ship groans beneath the weight of provisions. But one category outpaces them all in mystery and sheer volume. You descend into the hold again to retrieve more stores, and find yourself staring up at a stacked, waxy pyramid of cheddar wheels, Gouda rounds, and some suspiciously soft brie whose texture reminds you of wet wool. It's less a pantry and more a temple. The pyramid is real. The crew refers to it in hushed tones. The dairy ziggurat, someone calls it. Mount Lactose, says another. Each man reacts to it differently. Some are proud, some are terrified. You feel vaguely judged. There's a practical reason for the stacking. Space is limited, and the cheese, while heavy, is uniform in shape. It stacks better than sacks of flour, and it doesn't burst like canned goods do if frozen too hard. But still, something about the sheer volume screams poor planning, like a child left alone in a cheese shop with a royal budget. The sheer mass of dairy begins to warp your sense of normalcy. Cheese is everywhere. The pyramid is just the start. There are bricks of red luster under benches, slivers of Wensleydale passed around like coins, a particularly stinky block of washed rind Limburger that gets quietly moved from bunk to bunk like a hot potato. It's never officially acknowledged, but everyone knows the smell. You start making mental maps of where the various types are hidden. The brie by the aft mast, the aged cheddar behind the spare boiler parts, the moldy double Gloucester in the medical chest, for emergencies. There's even a single wheel of imported Swiss cheese, reserved for special occasions. No one remembers what those occasions are supposed to be, but its presence feels ceremonial. Now let's get historical. The British Navy, particularly in the early 1800s, had a love affair with durable foods. Cheese fit the bill. Salted meats went bad, biscuits crumbled, beer turned. But a well-aged cheddar? That could last. Maybe not deliciously, but functionally. In fact, there's a surviving provision list from a Royal Navy ship in 1810 that earmarks 2 pounds of cheese per sailor per week. That's about the size of a modern brick, every 7 days. So imagine scaling that up for a crew of 129 over several winters. That's a whole lot of bricks. And by the 1840s, this wasn't just protocol, it was gospel. You packed cheese the way modern people pack phone chargers. You didn't ask if it was needed. You just feared being without it. Historians still argue whether the cheese surplus on Arctic expeditions was an actual nutritional strategy or a bureaucratic leftover from naval provisioning forms that hadn't changed in decades. Some claim it was cheaper than salted meat. Others argue that it was psychologically comforting, a reminder of home in a land of nothingness. Still, others suggest the decision-makers didn't fully understand how different survival was in extreme cold versus tropical or temperate waters. But here's a fringe tidbit for you. One theory says that officers intentionally overpacked cheese as a kind of controlled rot buffer. The idea? If you knew some of your cheese would spoil, you overpacked so you'd always have enough that was still edible. It's a risky gamble. You try explaining to your stomach that only half of lunch is moldy and see how that goes. You wake one morning to a kind of cheese emergency. A wheel has cracked, possibly due to pressure, possibly cold. A thick, creamy wedge has oozed into nearby rations. The mess smells like old socks and betrayal. It takes 3 men and a mop to clean it, and no one volunteers to eat the remains. That's when you realize cheese, when too abundant, is no longer comfort food. It's a slow-moving hazard. The officers attempt a reorganization. They assign cheese stewards to monitor the stores and perform rotating inspections. It becomes a regular duty, charting the health, temperature, and, yes, aroma of the wheels. Lieutenant Smalls, once so proud of his cheddar stash, is caught weeping beside a cracked Stilton. She was only 12 months old, he whispers. Meanwhile, the cook is trying to keep meals varied. But there's only so much you can do when the ingredients are cheese and not cheese. One night, he presents a dish called Polar Rarebit. It's hot cheese on hot biscuit, garnished with black pepper and the crushed dreams of warm dinners past. Still, the pyramid persists. You've begun to mark time by it. Before we cracked the derby. After the Dom rolled loose. It's less a ration store now, more a mythic creature slumbering beneath the decks. You start to wonder about its weight. The math isn't comforting. Cheese is dense. A single 20-pound wheel might not seem like much until you have 800 of them. That's like hauling around a small whale made entirely of dairy. You find yourself whispering apologies to the ship as it creaks through pressure ice, dragged down by your collective lactose ambition. Some men grow resentful. There are whispers that the cheese is cursed, that it's bringing bad luck. A sailor named Briggs swears the blue mold in one wheel looked like a map, and then blames it for leading him to fall through the ice 2 days later. But not everyone's skeptical. One midshipman swears eating a daily slice of red Leicester keeps his joints from freezing. Another claims that cheddar dreams are warmer than regular ones. You suspect this is the beginning of a full-blown shipboard cheese cult. Still, it's hard to argue with results. When the cold creeps in, and your fingers go numb, and your breath fogs so thick you can't see, a bite of sharp cheddar really does do something. Maybe it's the calories. Maybe it's just the illusion of control. But it helps, and yet the cheese pyramid looms. Always. Waiting. Growing softer in the dark. One day, you'll have to eat your way to the bottom. Awaiting continue. Weeks pass. The ship groans with each icy swell, frozen more often than not in thick sheets of floe. Every step on deck is a gamble on black ice, and every breath is a puff of steam that quickly disappears into the silence. Time becomes strange in the Arctic. There's day, but not really. Night, but longer. And through it all, one thing remains constant: the cheese. You've reached the phase of the expedition where everything smells faintly of tallow and cabin fever. A fight almost breaks out over whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. You suggest settling it with a chunk of Stilton to the face. No one laughs. Then again, no one denies that Stilton could do real damage. Rations are still technically generous. The Admiralty planned for surplus. There are biscuits, preserved meat, tinned vegetables, and of course, enough cheese to open a modest bistro in Soho. But the human mind adapts, and even abundance becomes routine, which is why the cook's announcement one day hits hard. We're switching to rotation rationing. Translation: meals are now cycled in repetitive patterns. Cheese one day, preserved meat the next, then biscuit and lard mush, followed by a delightful everything stew that's mostly broth and regret. The men grumble, but there's no real alternative. Fuel is limited. Spirits are lower. Still, cheese retains a strange status. It's always present, always offered, and weirdly, always accepted. Even when the meat is rationed, even when the biscuits run low, the cheese flows like an eternal river of dairy. You almost suspect it's reproducing down in the hold. Here's a historical reality check. Arctic explorers in the 19th century burned upwards of 4,500 calories a day just to stay warm and move across snow and ice. That's more than a modern Olympic swimmer. Cheese, with its high fat and calorie density, made sense. Kind of, if you were trekking. But here's the catch. Most of the time, you're not trekking. You're stuck, frozen in, immobile. So all those dense calories, they're less life-saving fuel and more slow-brewing digestion bombs. The men grow sluggish. Digestion becomes an art form, and not a pretty one. Jokes start flying about forming a guild of Arctic constipation. You start hearing men argue over the best time to eat their daily cheese ration. Mornings keep me regular, one insists. Another says, only after dark. It softens the nightmares. You quietly decide to skip breakfast. And here's a curious little tidbit. On some expeditions, there were accounts of crew members trading cheese, using it as currency. A slice of sharp cheddar for a better blanket. A wedge of Gouda to skip mess duty. It was barter economy, Arctic style. Valuable not just for taste, but for morale. Your own bunkmate, Collins, starts hoarding his. You catch him shaving tiny curls off a wheel late one night, like he's whittling soap. He claims it's for his diary entries. You choose not to press further. Meanwhile, things above deck worsen. The temperature drops so low that the brass buttons on your coat burn your fingers. The ice around the ship moans and groans like a living thing. Some nights, it sounds like it's speaking. You try not to listen. Below, the ship shifts, settling into the pressure. Barrels strain. The dairy ziggurat sways ominously. A wheel tumbles one night, crushing a sack of flour. The cook mourns the flour. No one mentions the cheese. Historians still debate whether the quantity of cheese in Arctic stores had psychological as well as nutritional intent. Some argue that familiar foods from home helped reduce mutiny risk, stave off depression, and maintain social structure. After all, if you're eating what you ate in Portsmouth, even badly, it feels less like you're going to die in the middle of nowhere. But here's the problem. Cheese doesn't improve with freezing. The fats separate. The texture changes. What once was creamy becomes waxy, and what was hard becomes brittle. Meals grow more and more surreal. You bite into something once labeled double Gloucester, and it snaps like peanut brittle. You fear for your molars. In desperation, the cook begins melting cheese into a kind of thick sludge and pouring it over other rations to disguise their taste. He calls it Arctic sauce. Someone suggests branding it. Someone else throws up. But amidst the culinary horror, there are strange moments of peace. One night, after a dinner of stewed onions, a miracle find, topped with blue cheese, a mistake, you step outside onto the open deck. The aurora stretches across the sky in ribbons of green and violet. It reflects off the ice, off your breath, off the frost-slicked railings. You nibble a frozen crumb of cheddar and feel oddly grateful. The cold is real, the hunger gnaws, but for a moment, everything glows. Later that week, an officer makes a stunning announcement. Half of one cheese cache has gone missing. You wait for the laughter, the sarcasm. It doesn't come. The room falls deadly quiet. Theft is serious. Theft of cheese? That's practically mutiny. A search follows. Crates are opened, logs reviewed, nothing. The culprit is never found, but everyone knows it was someone in your room. You all start sleeping with your boots on and your rations under your pillow. By now, the dairy has begun to take on metaphysical weight. It isn't just food, it's identity, a link to home, a measure of time, a means of control. You can't name every star, but you can name all 14 cheese varieties in the hold. And that, maybe, is what it's really about. Not nutrition, not comfort, but certainty. The Arctic takes so much from you. Light, heat, motion. But the cheese, it's always there. Cold, heavy, slightly condescending. But there. And as your ship creaks once again against the unrelenting ice, and your breath fogs another window in the officer's mess, you wonder, what will happen when it runs out? Awaiting, continue. You don't notice it at first. Just a few muttered complaints, half laughed at over mugs of tea brewed with meltwater and quiet desperation. But then someone puts it into words, clearly, out loud, over breakfast. We've got too much cheese. Everyone freezes, forks pause midair. Even the cook stops stirring his pot of beige and beigeur stew. It's not that the statement is wrong. It's just taboo. Like admitting the ship's haunted or confessing you think the expedition leader is slowly going mad. But once said, it can't be unsaid. The spell breaks. "We've got way too much cheese," someone adds. There's nodding now. Quiet, ashamed agreement. And you've known it for weeks. You all remember when the officers opened the manifest before setting sail. The numbers were mind-numbing. So many barrels of salted pork, so many crates of hardtack, a modest quantity of dried peas. And then, cheese. Row after row, wheel after wheel, a forest of dairy. But at the time, you didn't question it. If anything, you were comforted. Cheese was familiar. Cheese was hearty. Cheese meant they'd planned for you to survive. But now, the sheer mass of it is overwhelming. There's more cheese than bread, more cheese than meat, more cheese than vegetables combined. There's more cheese than people. You start to suspect the cheese has its own voting bloc. You remember a very real historical figure, Sir John Franklin. His 1845 Arctic expedition, yes, that one, the one that ends badly, carried enormous quantities of cheese. Some sources put it at nearly 4,000 pounds. Historians still argue whether Franklin personally insisted on this or if it was standard admiralty fare. Some say he liked a good cheddar. Others argue it was bureaucracy, forms copied from older expeditions without much thought. The debate continues. But on your ship, there's no mystery. You're living it. You know the officers brought too much cheese because it felt like preparation. It felt right. But feelings don't thaw ice or mend sails. Here's a fringe theory one man shares over lunch. They packed all this cheese as ballast. You scoff at first, but he continues. Think about it. Food that doubles as weight, stacks neatly, doesn't spoil too fast, better than barrels of water. He might not be wrong. You recall reading that on earlier voyages, barrels of sand and stone were used as ballast, and sometimes replaced mid-journey with water or food. Cheese, being heavy and dry, was perfect for that dual role. That's not in most official logs, but it makes sense in a twisted butterfat kind of way. Meanwhile, storage space is dwindling. The dairy ziggurat, once a proud mountain, has begun to slump and spread. It's no longer tidy rows, but a cheese avalanche waiting to happen. And it's happening. Wheels slide, crush tins, wedge themselves under bunks. Someone finds a soft cheese melted into their extra socks. The socks are never worn again. Morale is slipping too. Men begin to associate certain cheeses with certain emotions. "The blue mold makes me anxious," one confesses. "That wax Dutch one reminds me of my ex-wife," says another. In a good way, you ask. He doesn't answer. Meals take on an eerie sameness. Cheese stew, cheese biscuit mush, cheese cube rations. The cook tries to vary the presentation, grating, melting, dicing, shaving, but there's only so much lipstick you can put on a Gouda. And yet the officers insist everything is under control. You're given another lecture about maintaining discipline and rationing with precision. You glance behind the speaker and notice 2 wheels of Cheshire stacked like throne cushions behind him. The irony is too pungent to bear. You wonder aloud if any of the cheese has gone bad. You're immediately shushed. The idea that some of it might not be edible is too horrifying. You're living on a floating city of dairy, and the idea it might be rotting from within, that's mutiny material. There's a faint fungal smell some mornings. Not sharp, not offensive, just present, like something alive is breathing nearby. You check the ziggurat. A layer near the bottom has turned slightly green. Natural rind, someone says, hopefully. Mature flavor, another offers. You both know it's mold. Still, it gets used. Nothing's wasted now. Even the odd-tasting bits are diced into mystery mash or shaved over thin broth. You find yourself chewing on a strip of wax one night before realizing it isn't food. You eat it anyway. It's got flavor. Historically, there's precedent. In the 1820s, the explorer William Perry noted that some provisions, especially cheese, were consumed past what modern standards would allow. There were no best-by dates. You simply smelled it, poked it, and hoped, or didn't. You just ate, so you do the same. At this point, the cheese is no longer a joke. It's a character, a presence, a stubborn, silent crewmate whose mood you gauge daily. Sometimes it's mellow and buttery, other times it's sharp and vindictive. Once it tries to kill you. That happens when a heavy wheel dislodges from a poorly tied crate during a storm shake and crashes down a ladder shaft, narrowly missing your head. The men laugh. You do too. But later that night, you stare into the dark and wonder if the cheese is making moves. Then comes the day you can't find your ration. It's not a big thing, just a wedge of mature red luster. But it's not there. The steward swears he set it out. You're convinced someone took it. It's the first time you've seriously contemplated violence over dairy. You search bunks, you interrogate Collins, you even open the crate of backup Gouda. Nothing. You go to bed hungry, your stomach gnawing, your dreams heavy with visions of orange wheels and crumbly wedges. In the dream, the cheese pyramid collapses, not with a crash, but a soft, suffocating roll. It engulfs the ship, the crew, even the ice beyond. You wake up in a cold sweat, whispering types of cheddar like a prayer. It's only a few hours later that you hear the new rumor. The officers are starting to use cheese as punishment. Yes, punishment. Steal something? You get a double cheese ration. Complain too much? More cheese. The logic is absurd, but oddly effective. Too much of a good thing becomes, well, not a good thing. One man receives an entire wheel of brie for breaking a lantern. He cries. You cry too. The smell is awful. At night, you can hear it breathing. The cheese? Or maybe it's just the wind. But either way, it's watching, waiting, knowing. And for the first time you wonder, what happens if we don't finish it all?
Work, waiting, continue.
By now you dream in cheese. Wheels, wedges, waxed, smoked, crumbling, veined. It invades your thoughts like snow drifts through a broken hatch, silent, inevitable, everywhere. You start to see it in the ice formations outside the porthole. A Gouda-shaped cloud, a brie-colored ridge. You blink, and it's gone. Your bunkmate Collins has taken to naming individual cheeses. He speaks to them before bed. "Good night, Mildred," he says to a particularly pale wheel of Lancashire. You say nothing. After all, she does look like a Mildred. Rationing is tighter now, but somehow the cheese is still abundant. You begin to suspect the original manifest may have been wrong, or worse, right in ways that defy reason. There is just too much of it. As food stocks diminish, the cheese remains unchanging, ever present, like it's resisting consumption. You remember a true historical moment that gives you pause. On the 1875 British Arctic expedition under Sir George Nares, there was a recorded complaint from one sailor who claimed he couldn't bear another bite of preserved food soaked in butter fat. That might not sound revolutionary, but at the time, complaining about your rations was like challenging the crown. Yet there it was, in the logs, clear as daylight, a revolt of the palate. So you're not alone. This isn't weakness, it's legacy. The cook has gone full mad alchemist now. He melts cheese into soups, mixes it into grain paste, even tries making cheese tea one cursed afternoon. It's an abomination, but some drink it. Why? Because it's hot, and the warmth feels like hope. Still, the cheese never really warms. Even when melted, it clings to your throat like guilt. You begin cutting it thinner and thinner, tiny shavings. Not to conserve, but to delay. Delay the moment it hits your tongue and reminds you of your situation, floating in a frozen world with only salted grease and curdled solids between you and starvation. Historians still debate whether such quantities of cheese were meant to be eaten, or if they served as psychological ballast, the kind of supply that simply looks reassuring. The way some people pack 3 chargers and a flashlight for a weekend trip. You're not really expecting to use them. You just feel better knowing they're there. But that illusion cracks. One morning, you wake to find the hold colder than usual. Much colder. Something's happened. A wheel has frozen solid and cracked wide open. A neat circular fracture. Clean as a geode. The insides are dry and dusty, crystalline. Not moldy, not spoiled. Just hollowed out. Like something essential has fled. You stare at it for a long time. It doesn't blink. And then the rats appear. You didn't even know there were rats. They must have stowed away, hidden deep in the lower decks. But here they are now, drawn out by the dairy. Scrawny, shivering, half wild. You spot one nibbling at a corner of Red Windsor. He stares back, unafraid. The officers panic. Rats mean more than stolen food. They mean disease. Contamination. You're given orders to trap or kill them. A bounty of a quarter wheel of cheddar per tail. It's the only time you've seen men hunt with that much enthusiasm in weeks. But even as the rats fall, the fear grows. Because if they came for the cheese, what else might? That night, a windstorm howls across the floes. The ship groans again, that all-too-human moan deep in its wooden ribs. Ice crashes against the hull like someone trying to get in, or out. You lie awake, half expecting to hear more than rats in the dark. Something heavier, a dragging noise, a slow, damp chew. You imagine the cheese moving on its own, rearranging in the dark hold, quietly changing shape, growing mold with intention. You shake it off. You're not insane. Not yet. But you are changing. All of you are. Remember that fringe theory about cheese and dreams? Some folk beliefs from rural Europe once held that eating too much cheese before bed caused strange visions. Cheese was blamed for sleepwalking, nightmares, even midnight visitations. You used to laugh at that. Now? You're not so sure. Collins wakes screaming one night, claims Mildred whispered something. You don't ask what. By now, even the officers admit the truth. There's too much cheese. Way too much. No one knows what to do with it. There's talk, tentative, ridiculous talk, of jettisoning a portion of the hoard, just dropping it into the sea, freeing up space, lightening the load, easing the psychic burden. But it sparks instant division. Half the crew supports it. Might. The other half argues it's madness to throw away food in a place like this. A heated debate turns physical. A man shoves another. A wheel of Adam becomes a projectile. The room descends into chaos. You sit back and watch, surreal and detached. They're not fighting about the cheese. Not really. They're fighting about control. About fear. About the fact that for the first time, the idea of surviving this expedition seems less likely than being preserved in it. A tableau of frozen men and eternal dairy. And then, as quickly as it began, it ends. Apologies are mumbled, bruises ignored. The Edam is quietly cleaned off the wall. The next day, a vote is held. Unofficial, of course, but serious. Each crewman asked quietly whether the ship should shed some cheese. The answer? A reluctant yes. Not all of it, not most of it, just a few wheels. The worst ones, the cracked ones, the haunted ones. It happens that night. A quiet procession. Men carry cheese wheels like coffins to the side of the ship. One by one, they're rolled into the ice-choked sea. Each splash dull, thick, final. No one speaks. No one makes jokes. You let Mildred go. And for a moment, the ship feels lighter. Not just physically, but psychically. Like you've let something go that was never meant to be kept this long. Later, you'll wonder if it changed anything. But in that moment, watching the last wheel slip under the black water, you swear the wind softens. Just a little. By morning, something has shifted. It's hard to explain. The ship still groans with cold. The air still smells faintly of salt, grease, and damp rope. But there's a lightness to it now, like someone finally opened a window in a very old house. Even the sky outside has gone from iron gray to something approaching color. You walk the decks. Everything looks the same. The frost still creeps along the wooden beams. Ice still grinds outside. But inside you? Something has changed. The cheese is no longer everywhere. The corners aren't crowded with crates of it. The air isn't as humid and tangy. A new ration has arrived, peas and a tiny bit of salt pork. And the cheese sits quietly on the side of your no longer the main event, no longer your captor. Just a slice. Just food. But peace doesn't last. Later that day, a message is found scratched into the storage room wall. Bring it back. No signature. Just those 3 words. At first, it's dismissed. A prank, maybe. A bored man with a knife and too much time. But that night, someone sees a shadow in the hold. Not a rat. Too tall. The next morning, one of the remaining cheese crates has been opened. Not stolen. Just opened. Like someone or something wanted to check the contents. You wonder who, or what, and why. This is when rumors start again. One man swears he saw movement in the sea during the jettison. Something long, pale, watching. It liked the cheese, he mutters. It wanted more. You try to stay rational, but it's hard up here where the sun doesn't rise and silence grows heavy. You remember that during the 1881 Greeley expedition, the men reported hallucinations after prolonged exposure to cold, hunger, and monotony. The official logs are dry, restrained, but personal letters tell another story: visions, voices, and a sense of being watched. Historians still argue whether these were true accounts or the result of starvation and scurvy. But you're not starving. Not yet. And scurvy? You're still getting your lemon juice. So what's your excuse? The cook tries something new, a cheese-free dinner. barley gruel with pork fat, and mercifully, no cheddar garnish. You're grateful. But some men complain, loudly. Where's the brie? One asks, genuinely distressed. I liked the Stilton, says another. It's subtle at first, but then it becomes clear. Some have grown attached. Collins refuses to eat unless there's cheese on his plate. He becomes jumpy, irritable, clutching his daily wedge like a talisman. Others follow. A quiet divide forms, the cheese loyalists and the cheese reformers. You hadn't planned on factions, but here they are. People always find a reason. You suspect one officer is sneaking extra rations. Not for survival, for comfort. You see him one night, crouched behind a barrel, chewing slowly, reverently, eyes closed like he's back home at a banquet. He doesn't see you. You don't report him, because maybe, just maybe, you get it. Cheese is memory. Cheese is warmth. Cheese is control. When everything else is ice and wind and gray, a bite of familiar dairy can anchor your mind. Still, the hoard is shrinking, slowly, not because of consumption, but something else. Missing wheels, vanished blocks, gone without explanation. You'd blame theft, but everyone's accounted for. The rats? You haven't seen one in days. Someone suggests locking up the remainder. It's done quietly. 2 padlocks on the final crates. A rotating watch. It feels ridiculous, but also necessary. Because now the cheese isn't just food. It's currency. It's memory. It's maybe alive. One afternoon, a man disappears. Just gone. His bunk untouched. His boots still under his cot. No sign of a struggle. A single bite of Gouda left on his pillow. No one talks about it directly. It's filed as accidental overboard, but you don't believe it. Not really. And when you glance at the cheese crate later that day, it seems fuller than before. That night, Collins suggests the impossible. What if it's feeding itself? You laugh. A little too hard. But then he lays it out, cold, logical, terrifying. If we keep eating it, but the hoard never shrinks, and then it starts growing, what does that mean? You tell him to shut up, but the thought stays, crawls behind your ears and settles deep. The next day, a crewman refuses his ration entirely, says he's fasting. Spiritual reasons. You're skeptical, but you watch him. He grows pale, sharp inward. He speaks less and less, and then quietly starts sketching wheels of cheese in the frost on the walls. Others begin to murmur of dreams again. In these dreams, the cheese is endless, a plain of dairy, rolling hills of wax and rind. Men walk for miles and never reach the edge. Some hear music, some see faces in the mold. You stop asking questions. Here's a historical side note that would have felt funny once. Queen Victoria was gifted a 1,000-pound wheel of cheddar in 1840. It took an entire village to make. She apparently cut one polite slice and then left the rest to rot. The gesture was symbolic. Over the top. Deliciously absurd. You wonder what she would think of your current nightmare. Would she nod and say, yes, quite? Or turn away in royal horror? You'll never know. Meanwhile, a new rule appears. Quiet. Unwritten. But everyone knows it. No more speaking to the cheese. You're not sure when that started, but several men were doing it, whispering to it, asking things of it, thanking it. No more. And yet, that night, you catch Collins in the corner. He's kneeling in front of Mildred's twin, Miriam, maybe? And muttering something low and rhythmic. His eyes are closed, he's crying. You back away slowly, and so the lines are clear. The cheese isn't just food anymore. It's something else, something powerful. Not magical, not divine, just other. You sense it. Everyone does. You're afraid, but not just of it, of what it's doing to everyone. The subtle changes. The way the cook never blinks anymore. The way the first mate hums a melody no one taught him. The way you wake with cheese crumbs on your chest you don't remember eating. And that's when you realize this isn't about surviving the Arctic anymore. This is about surviving each other. Awaiting continue. You start sleeping with one eye open. Figuratively at first, then literally. It's not just paranoia anymore. It's pattern recognition. A slow realization that something is wrong. Not just with the ship, but with the men. With you. At night, the walls creak with more than cold. You hear footsteps where no one should be. Muffled voices echo through the lower decks, soft like a prayer or a negotiation. You clutch your blanket tighter, remembering that one block of red letter the doctor swore was sweating in reverse. It had a layer of frost on it, but only in warm rooms. Cheese doesn't behave like this. Or it shouldn't. Remember those ancient Roman beliefs about cheese? They thought certain kinds could calm nightmares if placed under the bed, while others Goat cheeses especially could stir up prophetic dreams. Silly, maybe. But here, you would try anything to make the dreams stop. Your own have grown twisted, familiar faces stretched by waxy skin, fingers smeared with camembert, and always, always the same whisper. More. It's no longer clear if the cheese is speaking, or if you've simply absorbed its voice. You wake with the taste of salt in your throat, the weight of something round and heavy pressed to your chest. But there's nothing there. Then comes the accident. A crate falls in the storage hold, drops clean off its rack, and crashes open on the floor. A man was beneath it, his shoulders broken, ribs bruised. When they lift him out, his face is smeared with something chalky and yellow. He keeps repeating, "It landed on purpose. It chose me." The officers hush it up. Just a slip, they say, a case of poor stacking. But the crates don't stack themselves. Tensions rise. Two camps form openly now. The Cheese Watch, as they sarcastically call themselves, believe the horde is cursed, or worse, conscious. They wear little pins shaped like wedges, made from carved bone. They keep detailed logs of what moves, what vanishes, who eats what, and when. Then there's the others, the keepers, the ones who think the cheese is their salvation, that it sustains them, speaks to them, maybe even protects them. You think they're joking, until you see them refuse hot food just to keep chewing on cold cheddar. One guy even wears a necklace made from dried rind slices. He's smiling too much these days. Historians still debate how much superstition influenced morale during Arctic expeditions. In the logs from Franklin's doomed voyage, there are hints, mentions of omens, rituals, unspoken taboos. No one ever wrote, "We feared the food," but they didn't have to. You can read between the lines. You understand now. Deeply. One night, you're pulled onto the upper deck for your watch. It's dark, wind howling like a chorus of wolves. Snow slices sideways across the lantern glow. Your breath is a plume, and then you hear it, a splash. Then another. You peer over the side. At first, nothing. Then a flash of red wax bobbing in the black water. Another wheel, jettisoned in secret. Someone is still purging. Someone is trying to rid the ship of it quietly. You turn, thinking to report it, and lock eyes with Collins. He's just standing there, staring at you. No expression. Just holding a small round of cheese in both hands like it's an offering, or a threat. Neither of you speak. He vanishes into the stairwell without a word. The next morning, the cheese crate count is lower. Someone's been stealing again, or feeding it to the sea, or both. The officers are done pretending. A meeting is called. No nonsense, no theories, just decisions, a choice. Ration the cheese tightly, lock it up, cut the madness off at the source, or embrace it. Lean into the dairy, let it keep you alive until rescue or death arrives. The vote is closer than it should be. 7-6 in favor of rationing. Collins throws a wedge across the table and storms out. You don't see him again for 2 days. And when you do, he's different. Eyes sunken, smiling, covered in a thin sheen of melted fat. Says he found a new cache under the floorboards. Offers you a bite of something soft and blue-veined. You decline. He laughs and whispers, "Your loss." You check later. There is no floorboard cache, just old rope and dust, unless it's gone again. That night, the ship lurches. Not from storm, from impact. Something large slams into the hull from below. Men scramble on deck. Ice? A submerged berg? No, the water is still, but the sound, it was real. You feel it in your ribs, like the hull was being knocked on, as if by something polite, asking. That night, you don't sleep. Neither does anyone else. A week passes. The cheese levels off. No more crates vanish. No more dreams for now. You let yourself believe it's over. Then, one morning, a slab of cheese appears on your bunk. Neatly cut, wrapped in cloth, your name written in pencil on the wax. You didn't ask for it. No one admits to placing it. You leave it there, untouched. But you swear, by nightfall, it's larger than before. Word King knighting tinue. You don't move it. You tell yourself it's out of curiosity, a psychological experiment. Let's just see what happens, you think. But deep down, you know it's fear. You're afraid to touch it, afraid to throw it away, afraid of what might happen if you do. By morning, the cloth has unwrapped itself. Just a little. Enough to show the pale, creamy face of a soft, ripened wedge. Brie, maybe, but not quite. The rind is too thick, the smell too sweet, too knowing. You wrap it tighter, stuff it in the drawer. It's still warm. Later, a crewman collapses during roll call. dehydrated, dizzy. When they lift his shirt, his belly is covered in pale yellow blotches. Perfect circles. They look like bite marks, but not human. Smooth, rounded, like the press of something soft and dense, something cheese-shaped. He's unconscious for hours. When he wakes, he asks for Stilton. No water, just cheese. Just cheese. You can't shake the feeling that the food is starting to rewrite you. Not poison, not spoilage, just influence. Like how Roman legions once salted their greens with fermented fish paste and called it garum. Strange, salty, delicious, and maybe a little mind-altering. Historians still argue whether it had addictive properties or just comforted men too far from home. Sound familiar? The doctor tries to remain logical. He says isolation makes the mind strange. He insists cheese isn't sentient. You almost believe him, until someone finds his private stash. 6 wheels, all wrapped in black cloth, hidden beneath his mattress. Each with a name. He'd been talking to them, journaling for them, recording their temperatures. By nightfall, he's gone. Not overboard, not dead. Gone. And in his place, a 7th wheel left exactly where his boots should be. You don't tell anyone, because they already know. The rules of the ship have changed. You eat what you're given. You don't ask who cooked it. You never, ever go below decks alone. And if you find a gift of cheese on your bed, you thank it. Quietly, under your breath. No more open suspicion. That was the old world. This is the new dairy order. There's comfort in routine. Morning watch, soup, sleep. A bite of the good stuff if you're lucky. It keeps you from unraveling completely. And then, a breakthrough. The ice shifts. Cracks echo for miles. One morning, someone shouts, "Open water!" You race to the bow. It's real. A path? A sliver of dark sea. Not much, but maybe enough. The captain calls a meeting. We move. Now. The air shifts again. Not just the wind, the crew. Hope is dangerous here. Hope pulls you forward, but it also prees your mind open. And some things should stay sealed. Gear is packed. Supplies inventoried. The cheese is, of course, accounted for with near-religious precision. Half the hoard will be taken on sledges. The rest buried deep, throughout with flags and coordinates, a future cache. The mission is clear. Reach the next bay, radio for help, and wait for pickup. Simple. Too simple. Your sled is heavy, not with tools, not with clothes, but with a crate labeled special rations. Inside, cheese. Only cheese. A full wheel of aged mimolette, dense as cannonball. 2 blocks of Havarti. A log of tangy goat's cheese coated in herbs. It smells like summer, like hallucination. You ask why. The answer is silence. You trudge into the white. 3 men pull each sled. 1 leads. The dogs bark in sharp, rhythmic bursts. The wind howls like it knows your names. And behind you in the distance, the ship shrinks into a dot. Somewhere back there, Mildred waits. Collins is on your team. He hasn't spoken much, but you catch him smiling at the crate every so often. Like it told him a joke. Like he's in on something you're not. The first night on ice, you camp in a hollow. Tent pitched, fire lit, spirits cautiously high. Then someone opens the crate, not to eat, just to check. Inside, something's changed. One of the cheeses, an Alpine-style wedge that was whole at departure, is now half-eaten. No one confesses. You all accuse each other in silence. Next morning, the marks are there again, pressed into the tent wall. A perfect round imprint. No footsteps nearby, no wind, just the shape. The suggestion, as if something paused, leaned in, and whispered through the fabric. More. You keep moving. By day 3, Collins is muttering to the wedge. By day 4, someone finds their gloves shredded, and in their place, a neat pair of mittens knitted from cheesecloth. You don't ask how. You don't ask why. You just keep walking. And always the weight of the crate grows. No one adds anything, but it grows. You measure it. Mark the lid with charcoal. Each morning, heavier. Historians still argue about the fate of the Karluk expedition in 1913. Icebound, scattered, half the crew surviving only through extraordinary endurance and sheer psychological resilience. Some journals hint at strange dietary obsessions, repetitions, rituals, the kind of details that were stripped from the official Navy reports, sanitized for public digestion. What would your journals say? You keep walking. You try to ration, to resist, but the wind gets louder. The cold gnaws deeper. And when someone offers you a sliver of Gruyere, still soft despite the temperature, you don't say no. You eat it. You eat it fast, and you sleep like a stone. But the dreams return. This time the wheels speak in chorus. They offer warmth, power, continuity, a kingdom made of rind. And when you wake, the crate is open again. But now, one cheese is new. It wasn't there yesterday. It's smooth, uncut, marked with a symbol you don't recognize. 3 circles inside a triangle. Ancient? Personal? Maybe just mold. You shut the lid. You don't talk about it. You just walk. Because ahead is rescue. Ahead is radio. Ahead is maybe home. Unless, of course, the cheese has other plans.
Awaiting continue.
The crate speaks now, not in words, not really, but in urges, sensations, whispers so soft they might just be hunger or cold or madness. You try not to be dramatic about it, but when Collins kneels beside it like it's a shrine and softly hums Greaves, you start to consider the possibility that you're no longer fully in charge of your own thoughts. The weather gets worse. Of course it does. The wind doubles back on itself like it's trying to herd you. Your maps are outdated, landmarks swallowed by white. You start walking in circles. Your boots sink deeper each day, even though the snow seems no higher. One man swears the ice is rising to meet you. You sleep in shifts. You sleep badly, and the crate grows heavier. You try to lighten the load. Remove a wheel. Just one. It screams. Not loud. Not external. But your ears ring for hours afterward. Your fingers won't stop shaking. When you look again, the cheese is back inside, unmarked. Untouched. Smug. Collins says, it didn't like that. You don't ask what he means. Instead, you eat your allotted inch of manchego and try to imagine a life before dairy. Nothing comes. That night, a blizzard traps you in the tent. Snow piles up against the flaps. The world is muffled. Time unspools. Someone hums in their sleep. Or maybe it's the wind. Or maybe it's the crate. No one checks. You start cataloging changes. Mental ones. You don't dream of home anymore. You dream of caves filled with endless shelves, cheese wheels as far as the eye can see, stacked high and humming, and in the middle, a throne made of curds, crowned with a single perfect wedge. It glows. You wake up hungry. You're always hungry now. Even when you eat, it doesn't help. The cheese doesn't fill you. It just teases, it promises, and sometimes you find your hands moving without permission, reaching for it, stroking the rind, feeling its pulse. Yes, pulse. You stop asking questions. Fringe explorers in the 1800s often developed bizarre coping behaviors. Journaling in code, constructing elaborate belief systems around the land itself, even talking to their gear. Historians still argue whether these were signs of psychosis or simply the only way to survive extreme isolation. But none of those men ever hauled a crate full of living dairy. On day 9, Collins disappears. No goodbye, no gear missing, just gone. You find his boot prints leading away from camp toward a crevasse no one's marked before. At the edge, you peer over. The walls are smooth, frozen, and halfway down, caught in a shallow outcropping of ice, is Collins's scarf, tied in a perfect bow. Next to it, a wedge. Bright yellow, no frost, still steaming. You don't recover the body. You don't try. You go back to camp and find a second scarf inside the crate. Not his, yours. No one says a word. The next morning, the cheese has multiplied. That's not metaphor. There are more pieces. Different ones. Textures you didn't pack. Shapes that defy logic. One looks like a Mobius strip. Another is transparent. One smells exactly like your grandfather's garage. You don't remember that smell, but you know it. You stop doing inventories. You stop trying to finish this rescue journey. You realize slowly that there is no plan. Only walking. Only cold. Only cheese. Your captain dies in his sleep on day 11. Peacefully. No sign of distress. His body is warm for hours. When you finally move him, you discover something under his pillow. A note, handwritten in a cramped scrawl. It's always been the cheese. That's all. You burn the note. You don't tell the others. The weather clears for a single day. Clear blue sky, crystalline air, and far in the distance, a black line on the horizon. A tower? A ship? A mirage? You walk toward it. The crate comes with you, always. But something is different now. It's not just heavy, it's anchoring. You no longer walk ahead of it, you orbit it. Like the whole team moves in subtle arcs, always returning to it. Someone starts calling it the nucleus. You don't argue. That night, you dream of the tower again, closer. Inside it, shelves of cheese rise into infinity. The throne is occupied now. It's you, and you're smiling, and you're melting. You wake up sweating despite the cold. Your blanket is damp. Your breath smells buttery. You've changed. They all have. Skin pale and waxy, eyes glassy. Words come slower now, like you're translating from a language you didn't know you knew. You make it to the tower on day 13. It's not made of stone, not metal. It's cheese. Pressed, aged, cut into bricks and stacked impossibly high. Impossible. Except, there it is, real. You walk inside. The air is warm, humid. You haven't felt warm in weeks. It makes you cry. You don't ask why it's there. You don't ask who built it. You don't ask who's waiting for you at the center, because you already know. You follow the spiral stairs, carved from Parmesan, until you reach the inner chamber. It's quiet. And on the pedestal, a wedge. Smooth, shining, older than time, the perfect ratio of fat to salt. It smells like salvation. You drop to your knees. You don't remember doing it. You reach out. Your hand is already there. You pick it up. It speaks. Not in words, not in noise, but in memory. Every taste, every hunger, every winter night from every life you've lived. And suddenly you understand why the 19th century explorers packed so much cheese. Not for survival, not for tradition, but because it called to them, as it now calls to you. The wedge feels alive in your hand, not pulsing or warm, but somehow aware, like it's listening, like it's waiting. You don't dare eat it. Not yet. Instead, you sit down on the cold floor of the cheese tower, legs crossed, and close your eyes. The hum of the walls, the rind and curds pressed close around you, begins to sync with your breathing. It's hypnotic. You remember the ship, the ice, the endless trudging, the whispered names of the cheeses. The strange camaraderie forged in cold and hunger. You feel a twinge of something like nostalgia, or maybe regret. Then the voices start. Not your crew, not the captain, but others. Ghostly echoes of explorers past, men who disappeared in the Arctic's white deserts, swallowed by cold and silence. They speak in a mixture of languages, English, French, Inuit, Norwegian. They talk about lost supplies, about hope turned to despair, about cheese, always cheese. One voice stands out. An older man, his tone gentle but firm. Cheese is not just food. It's a symbol, a pact, a promise. You wonder what promise. The voices grow louder. The tower trembles. Suddenly the walls bleed a golden light. The rind melts into streams of molten cheese, pooling at your feet. It smells like home, like hearth fires and laughter and late-night stories told over cups of warm tea. You want to reach out, but something stops you, because this is not a dream. It is a choice. You can eat. Or you can leave. Historians still argue whether these mystical experiences were real phenomena or the desperate minds of men facing death. But here, in this tower of Derry, the line between madness and magic is thinner than a slice of provolone. You decide. Slowly, you break off a small piece of the golden wedge. It melts on your tongue. Warmth floods your body, your thoughts clear. You see the path forward. It's not out. It's in. Into the history. Into the mystery. Into the cheese itself. Because that is the secret. The explorers packed too much cheese because it was more than nutrition. It was a companion. A guardian. A key. You understand now that survival in the Arctic was never just about physical endurance. It was about connection. To the land. To the spirit of exploration. To the strange comfort of a wedge of cheese when the world was nothing but ice and silence. You stand. The tower fades. The crate is empty. The Arctic is still. And you are ready to tell the story of why 19th century explorers packed too much cheese and what it meant. The wedge feels alive in your hand, not pulsing or warm, but somehow aware, like it's listening, like it's waiting. You don't dare eat it, not yet. Instead, you sit down on the cold floor of the cheese tower, legs crossed, and close your eyes. The hum of the walls, the rind and curds pressed close around you, begins to sync with your breathing. It's hypnotic. You remember the ship, the ice, the endless trudging, the whispered names of the cheeses. The strange camaraderie forged in cold and hunger. You feel a twinge of something like nostalgia, or maybe regret. Then the voices start. Not your crew, not the captain, but others. Ghostly echoes of explorers past. Men who disappeared in the Arctic's white deserts, swallowed by cold and silence. They speak in a mixture of languages, English, French, Inuit, Norwegian. They talk about lost supplies, about hope turned to despair, about cheese. Always cheese. One voice stands out. An older man, his tone gentle but firm. Cheese is not just food. It's a symbol, a pact, a promise. You wonder what promise. The voices grow louder. The tower trembles. Suddenly, the walls bleed a golden light. The rind melts into streams of molten cheese, pooling at your feet. It smells like home, like hearth fires and laughter and late-night stories told over cups of warm tea. You want to reach out, but something stops you, because this is not a dream. It is a choice. You can eat, or you can leave. Historians still argue whether these mystical experiences were real phenomena or the desperate minds of men facing death. But here in this Tower of Derry, the line between madness and magic is thinner than a slice of provolone. You decide. Slowly. You break off a small piece of the golden wedge. It melts on your tongue. Warmth floods your body. Your thoughts clear. You see the path forward. It's not out. It's in. Into the history. Into the mystery. Into the cheese itself. Because that is the secret. The explorers packed too much cheese because it was more than nutrition. It was a companion, a guardian, a key. You understand now that survival in the Arctic was never just about physical endurance. It was about connection. To the land. To the spirit of exploration. To the strange comfort of a wedge of cheese when the world was nothing but ice and silence. You stand. The tower fades. The crate is empty. The Arctic is still. And you are ready to tell the story of why 19th century explorers packed too much cheese and what it meant. Awaiting continue, you find yourself back on the ice, the crate gone, but the weight of its story lingering in your bones. The blinding white stretches all around, the sky a frozen dome above you, and the wind whispers secrets you never asked to hear. You trudge forward, each step heavier with memory and mystery, carrying not just your gear but the echoes of those who came before. The ship is nowhere in sight, swallowed by snow and time, but its legacy remains. You recall how Arctic explorers of the 19th century meticulously planned their provisions, packing barrels and crates with everything they might need: salted meat, hardtack, and famously, cheese. But why cheese? You think of the explorers' diaries describing the comforting, familiar taste amid the desolation. Cheese was portable, calorie-dense, and above all, morale-boosting in the endless cold. Yet the deeper you wander into these memories, the more you realize the cheese was also a symbol of control, of normalcy in a place that defied normalcy. Historians still argue whether the psychological effects of such rations helped or hindered the crews. Some say cheese sparked a craving that kept men alive. Others suggest it may have fueled obsessive behaviors as they succumbed to isolation. You pause, toes numb, and remember the curious fringe tales of cheese madness. An old seafarer's myth where explorers developed secret rituals around their food, treating their rations like talismans or silent companions. You chuckle softly at the absurdity, but the lingering unease settles like frost in your chest. Maybe there was truth behind those stories. Maybe the cheese was more than cheese. As you push onward, the silence wraps around you like a thick wool blanket. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the snow, and you spot a familiar shape, a rough shelter built from ice blocks. It feels like home, a monument to endurance and hope. Inside, you find traces of the past, scratches on the walls, faded notes tucked into crevices, and curiously, a small piece of hardened cheese, untouched and oddly warm to the touch. You wrap it carefully in your scarf. You realize this journey through frozen landscapes and dairy mysteries mirrors your own struggle to find meaning, to survive, and to carry forward stories that might otherwise be lost. With a deep breath, you stand, the Arctic night settling gently around you, and continue your trek into the unknown, guided by the ghosts of explorers and the strange, enduring comfort of cheese. Awaiting continue. You push forward as the Arctic night deepens, the stars sharpening into icy pinpricks overhead. The cold bites at your cheeks and hands, but somehow the weight of the cheese and the stories it carries warms you from within. Each step feels like a thread pulling you through a vast tapestry, woven from courage, madness, and resilience. You recall that 19th century explorers often grappled not only with the harsh environment, but also with their own minds. The isolation was relentless, the monotony crushing. Cheese, with its rich textures and flavors, offered a small rebellion against that endless white void, a reminder of home and humanity. But some accounts hint that certain varieties might have had unexpected effects, sparking vivid dreams or even hallucinations. Historians still argue whether those mental shifts were mere exhaustion or something more, an almost mystical bond between man and fermented milk. You can't help but wonder if the explorers were unwitting participants in an ancient ritual, their survival tied not just to provisions, but to the very essence of the foods they carried. A sudden crunch in the snow startles you. You turn to see a figure approaching through the swirling flakes, an Inuit hunter, eyes sharp, face weathered by decades in this unforgiving land. He nods solemnly, his presence a living bridge between your world and the Arctic's timeless spirit. He offers no words but extends a small package wrapped in sealskin. Inside, you find a round of aged Arctic cheese, its flavor unfamiliar but comforting. The gift feels like an unspoken blessing, a reminder that survival here is not just about endurance but connection to people, to land, to history. You share a nod and a fleeting smile before he disappears back into the blizzard. Alone again, you wrap the cheese carefully and press on, feeling the layers of your journey intertwine with those who walked this path long before you. The cold sharpens, but so does your resolve. Because this isn't just a story about explorers and cheese. It's about how we carry the past with us in unexpected forms, even when the world is frozen and silent. You keep moving, step by slow step, guided by hunger, hope, and the strange, enduring call of the cheese. Word count, awaiting, continue. The sky shifts color, faint purples melting into icy blues as dawn creeps in. Your breath clouds in front of you, delicate and fleeting. The Arctic feels endless, but you know every step writes a story, one etched in frost and forgotten time. You clutch the gift of that Arctic cheese, a symbol of survival and connection, and feel an odd kinship with those 19th century explorers who trusted their fates to similar comforts. You remember reading that some expeditions carried peculiar varieties, like glacier cheese, made from milk of reindeer grazing near the ice, aged by cold winds rather than cellars. These cheeses developed unique textures and even strange chemical properties. Scientists today debate whether compounds in such cheeses might have subtly affected explorers' moods or cognition. Historians still argue whether this accidental food psychotropic effect played a role in shaping expedition decisions, or if it's just folklore fueled by the long Arctic nights. Your thoughts drift to the practical side. Why pack so much cheese? It was calorie-dense, yes, rich in fats and proteins crucial for cold weather survival. But cheese also lasted longer than many fresh foods and was compact enough to carry over rough ice and snow. It was a pragmatic choice born from experience, and maybe a little superstition. Your boots crunch over icy crust as you reach the edge of a frozen fjord, the water beneath a glassy mirror of stillness. You pause, gazing at the horizon where the sea meets the sky in a seamless, silent line. A faint melody catches your ear, somewhere between a hum and a whistle, carried by the wind. It reminds you of Collins humming Greensleeves beside the crate. The memory stirs a strange warmth, a tether to humanity amid the vast loneliness. You settle on the ice, unpacking your meager rations. The cheese, aged and mysterious, offers more than nourishment now. It's a story, a symbol, a bridge. You bite in, savoring the taste that has traveled centuries and continents to reach you. The flavors are complex, layered, like the expedition's legacy itself. Hope, madness, resilience, and a peculiar obsession with cheese. Tonight, as you watch the endless Arctic twilight, you realize that the explorer's cheese was never just about survival. It was about carrying a piece of home into the void, a morsel of comfort in a world that offered none. You smile, the cold fading just a little. You stand, the cold pressing on your skin, the horizon stretching wide and silent. The journey that began with a crate of cheese has transformed into something else. An understanding that survival in the Arctic was as much about the mind and spirit as about the body. You think about the explorers, packing their supplies with care, stuffing their crates full of cheese, more than necessary, some say, and wonder if they knew something deeper. Maybe the cheese was a talisman, a comfort, or even a key to enduring the endless white. Historians still debate why cheese played such an outsized role in these expeditions. Was it pure practicality? Or did it carry a secret meaning, a psychological lifeline in the vast desolation? The wind whispers again, soft now like a lullaby. You sit on the snow, pulling your coat tight and let the stillness wash over you. The Arctic is quiet but alive. Its stories frozen in ice and memory. You close your eyes and taste the cheese on your tongue, rich and layered, a reminder of home, of warmth, of human resilience. As the twilight fades and the stars emerge, you breathe deeply, feeling the weight of the past lighten. You've walked through history, madness, and mystery. And now you rest. The crate is empty, but the story lingers. You smile softly and let the Arctic night cradle you. Wind down, 300 words. Slowly, the cold recedes as your body finds warmth beneath layers of fabric and memories. The harsh white world softens into gentle hues of twilight blue and silver. You feel the tension in your muscles ease, the endless weight of snow and ice replaced by a quiet calm that settles deep in your bones. Breathing slows. Your heartbeat matches the soft pulse of the Arctic night, a rhythm as old as the explorers who once trudged this frozen expanse, carrying their secrets and their cheese. You imagine their faces, weathered and determined, flickering like shadows across the vast white canvas. The stories you've gathered unfold like gentle waves, each one a whisper of hope and endurance, a reminder that even in the coldest, most unforgiving places, warmth can be found. In memories, in shared meals, in the strange comfort of a humble wedge of cheese, you feel yourself drifting, weightless and free, carried by the slow hum of history and the soft, endless sky. The wind's whisper becomes a lullaby, wrapping you in a gentle embrace as the Arctic night stretches on, timeless and still. Rest easy now. The journey's end is near, but the story remains. And as you close your eyes, the cheese's strange call fades into a peaceful silence. Sleep well, explorer. The night is yours. End of script. Sweet dreams.